So thank you very much to join us today. This is a special session, and we will talk about the next Financing for Development Summit in this strategic year of 2025. The session is organized in different speeches, which are actually interventions and really short. We want them short because we don't have that much time. Sorry, I'm doing the housekeeping here, but it's important that we know that those are millimetered, speeches. You have to be brief, go to the fact, and it's the contribution from the Public Development Bank's perspective to the FfD4 that is coming. We have the honor to have also the Undersecretary Lee Junhwa heading the UNDESA that will deliver also an opening speech. You will have a presentation of the report the Financing Committee has submitted to the next FfD, and a series of intervention, including our ministerial representative here. So please be short. That's a lot of people asking for the floor. I count on you. It's a technical discussion, a strategic discussion, but be short, please. The other point, the minister will probably address in French. If you want to have translation, there is a translation tools in front of you. You just plug it on the mic's basis, and then you will hear everything in English if needed, if someone is speaking another language. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the floor to the Undersecretary Lee Junhwa.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Well, dear colleagues, excellencies, it's a great honor and a pleasure to join you at this very crucial session to share some of all the UN perspectives and ideas on how we could unlock the potential of the public development banks for an ambitious outcome at the FfD4. Well, from UN perspective, we definitely believe that FfD4 will present the last chance before the 2030 to inject ambition, urgency, and most importantly, concrete SDG financing commitments to turn aspirations into the actions. So over the past several days, you have developed a number of the creative ideas and how the public development banks can also join in this process together with other stakeholders. As a conference secretary general, I'm very fully committed to working with all of you to deliver the successful outcomes. Achieving sustainable development and protecting our planet actually requires urgent transformations. Current trajectories, however, fall short significantly of the 2030 Agenda's promise. The FfD4 offers the opportunity to address the development crisis. So based on our preparations and also from our own perspectives, we should deliver at least on the two key areas. First, a large-scale and impact-focused sustainable development investment push. Second, the reform of the international financial architecture. So please allow me to share more insights on this huge potential of PDBs in both areas. The needed investment push must move beyond the billions to trillions. That's the narratives we developed in Addis about 6 or 10 years ago, to focus on impact, embracing the investment directionality and the public leadership in public finance, as well as in providing incentives to align the private investment with sustainable development. We want to see more alignment between the MDBs, PDBs, and in private investment on this SDG development agenda. So public development banks are critical to this investment push, a role recognized already in our preparations for the FfD4. In addition to that, the national and the multilateral development banks can provide direct public investment and leverage the private investment through risk sharing, guarantees, and managing foreign exchange risks. National and subnational development banks with their local experiences can help the international investors navigate the operational and the reputational risks, while strengthening the local capacity, of course. They are essential actors in the country's institutional landscape. So in this context, I would like to introduce some relevant proposals in the zero draft for the FfD4. Number one, the draft includes a global call to establish the public development banks in countries that do not yet have them. We have also heard about the efforts to establish the new multilateral development banks. I hope the FfD4 advances these efforts, including through the Severe Impact Initiative. A new development bank, like the Bank for the Resilience and Prosperity, would be a perfect announcement to deliver at the FfD4. Second, the draft also calls for the strengthening existing public development banks, including through the capacity enhancement, capital increases, and the technical support, enabling them to offer substantial long-term, low-cost, sustainable development financing. The draft also invites the public development banks to harmonize the impact metrics as a basis for mobilization targets. Third area, the draft calls for recognizing PDBs' mandates, business models, and risk profiles in addressing governance and oversight. Finally, and most crucially, the zero draft emphasizes strengthening the development bank system through the cooperation between MDBs and the national development banks, with the public development banks working together as a whole system. So this includes co-financing, risk exchange, joint project preparations, and hybrid capital or the equity contributions. Our discussions this week actually have shown the strong dynamism for this element in the zero draft. It is also crucial that the public development banks engaged with their stakeholders to maintain the ambitions of the zero draft or the FfD4 outcome document. So, Excellencies, dear colleagues, to further strengthen the engagement at the FfD4, I strongly encourage the public development banks to organize side events at the margins of the Severe Conference. The information on the side events organization is already available at the FfD4 website. Please check the website, and if you do have any further specific queries, please approach to us. So that I will stop here. I'm ready and willing to listen to your ideas and strongly encourage you to share more with my team for the preparations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Under Secretary General. I take the floor as the chair of Finance in Common to briefly present you the contribution of our community to the FfD4 process. But of course, I start by thanking you and Shari. We deeply appreciate your presence, physical presence at Finance in Common this year. It's extremely important to have a direct discussion with you and many parties, of course, beyond the public banks, to reach the best possible result in Sevilla. So my first message on behalf of FIX is we expect a success, an ambitious result of the FfD4 process. This is something we need as public financial institutions to have a stronger, clearer guidance, probably, than what we have for now, what we see maybe eroding somehow, so that we are able to serve our governments and in the end serve the population, the people that are expecting a lot from public institutions. You sent me a letter, I think, about a year ago in June, I think, to ask Finance in Common to provide a contribution, so an official request by the UN, and we're very proud of that. We organized, so I want to thank all the colleagues around the table or online that participated the work of the steering committee, and I want to thank particularly Nicolas, Clémence, Adama for this work with regional associations of public banks, multilateral development banks, IDFC, individual institutions. About 26 of them made very solid regular contribution. That led to this contribution I will officially give you today. I'm the Secretary General, but you know already the content. And this idea is really to provide to the FfD4 process the voice, other voices, multiple voices of ambition. Also embarking, Jajun is here, embarking also the results of the Global Research Network linked with Finance in Common, and also, and I think we will have to do that in Sevilla, demonstrate the practical solutions that all our institutions have and can demonstrate in Spain, so that, of course, it's about the framework, it's about the ambition, but it's also about concrete, direct impact to support the international agenda. One word on the propositions. Again, I want to thank you and Shari for the very good basis that the zero version of the outcome document is already. But I know there's a PrepCom 3 coming. So if you allow me, just to stress again the importance of the recognition of national development banks as key stakeholders. It's already you reminded us already very well phrased in the first document. The figures Minister Godongwada said at the opening ceremony. 26% of G20's GDP if we add national development banks to the picture. The system, that's the second message. The system is mentioned in the document. Probably the feeling in this room is that it could be strengthened. Maybe not by Seville. We will be able to say how the system will function precisely, but at least let's see the system so that we can think it and then progressively organize it, the system, both in its capacity to finance and its capacity to originate when a market failure about it. And the last message is about, of course, I think this summit sticks to the sustainability agenda and with the willingness not only to be accountable to it on our own balance sheets, but also with the ambition to mobilize other players, notably private finance, and reorient their flows in the best possible direction. So that's it. And last point, beyond the report, of course, we stand at your disposal after Seville, because Seville will have to be implemented. So if you find from the UN side any use for Finance in Common to play a role in the monitoring or the implementation of the conclusions of Seville, I think we said that we will think about next step for Finance in Common to make it a bit more stable, maybe, or maybe that's an avenue for discussion with the UN about it. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Thanks to the USG for your opening comments, and to Remy Review and to Fix for organizing the session, which I think is a really important session to have as we move towards Sevilla, but also for answering the call and the request to collaborate with us, and for putting together this really excellent inputs into the process. And yes, I think there are already lots of ideas and follow-up, so be careful what you offer when we come to you with all sorts of requests. I'm going to moderate today's session, and also just to say that this really is a session for an open conversation, for everyone to please keep their comments short, because we really want to hear. This is a time both for you to learn more and ask questions if you have any on Sevilla and what the FfD4 process, as well as to hear your inputs and thoughts to make it a stronger process. And so with that, I'm going to go to our first speaker, and it's Dr. Jean Leon, the CEO of the Development Bank for Resilient Prosperity, that, as you just heard, would be a really great place. Sevilla would be a great place to launch that discussion. So, Doctor, over to you.
Thank you very much. So FfD4 is expected to propose reforms to the global financial architecture to support sustainable development, focusing on climate resilience, biodiversity financing, and financial inequities. We posit that true sustainable development must be resilient to all types of shocks, including natural hazards and global economic disruptions. The current GFA, the Global Financial Architecture, is not designed to address those requirements. In fact, the GFA incorporates asymmetries, control over priorities, measures of risk that penalize vulnerability and generate low resilience cycles, and adopts a partial versus a systems focus, which typically means inadequate cost measures that lead to perverse incentives. So to be clear, current reform efforts will not be sufficient to meet the needs of all our stakeholders. So therefore, more substantial, comprehensive, and bold reforms are needed to address those asymmetries. This approach can be structured through 4 C's: capital, and we believe finance is a powerful enabler, but it is insufficient on its own. We must have coherence, means the policy and the vision has to generate fit-for-purpose investments. We must have consistency, long-term policy certainty with adequate risk-return metrics and incentives, and we must have capacity, which has to be knowledge-driven, science-driven, multidisciplinary, and multi-stakeholder integrated systems approach. To be able to do this, we propose a novel foundational 3 Ps approach. And while this is an FfD4, it's quite clear to us that we cannot just focus on finance. We have to see the entire package. So the first is we need a paradigm shift. The paradigm shift, the first P, is based on the statement that planetary ecological stability is paramount to the survival of all life forms, including human civilization. Therefore, we need to shift all of what we do onto a long-term, prosperity-focused, regenerative investment planning approach versus short-term profits generation. And that therefore requires us to adopt a systems control approach that takes into account climate change, biodiversity, ocean health, land use, chemical pollution at one and the same time. The second is that this investment, if we were to see it as that, has the potential to achieve human rights-based prosperity, including food security from sustainable agriculture and fisheries, water security from freshwater management, energy security through a just transition, health security, education security, and shelter security from social cohesion and institutional strength. The second element, the second P, is we need associated policies to deliver on this paradigm shift. and I want to recognize two particular elements. One is we need to incentivize natural capital through conservation, preservation, and restoration to unlock the wealth stored in our ecosystems. I would suggest we adopt and develop further the MVI framework to capture and distinguish vulnerability and resilience that limits the potential of countries to proceed. And we need to advance blended finance, performance-based, and state contingent classes of instruments to design terms to capture both pre-shock, shock, and post-shock periods. That's the only way we can customize approaches to yield a genuine FfD4 reform going forward. And then partnerships is the third P, and we want to endorse here fostering a coherently operating public development bank system to leverage local institutional knowledge, encourage policy ownership, and promote aggregation for scale and efficiency, thereby modifying the global financial architecture bottom up. The second is we need to embrace technology transfer and mainstream evidence-based decision-making to build capacity with private sector innovators and to promote risk sharing in infrastructure and high-impact ecological stability projects as joint responsibility to achieve national missions. And with that, I like to end here, as this would be, for me, what we need to bring to FfD4, a complete package that identifies what has to be invested in, to what end, through what financing mechanism, and through which institutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and for starting off, for putting us on to remind us that the conference, that the aims and the goals are really, really high, and that we have a lot to fill. And really, it's really a call both for FfD4, but also for all the people in this room, as so many of the issues, the capital, the investment, and the instruments you mentioned are going to come from national public banks. And so with that, I'm going to go to the next intervention, which is Mr. Admasu Tadisi, who is the Trade and Development Bank Group President and Managing Director. So over to your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to all. Very quickly, I just thought a couple of quick points to plug into our thinking for FFD. One is maybe building on the intervention of the previous speaker, embracing some of the principles of the Bridgetown Initiative for it to be adopted more widely within the ecosystem of PDBs. The MDBs have recognized that shocks need to be treated with seriousness, and we've seen how the global MDBs have now adopted that. But I think the rest of the PDBs, but not just PDBs, I think ratings agencies and other regulatory bodies should also give special consideration to giving breathing room during shocks to sovereigns and entities within those jurisdictions. Another point is, of course, building on some of the perspectives from Monterey and Addis Ababa, the whole question of mobilizing, private capital, institutional capital into the world of development finance. And I think there was a lot of agreement that pension funds and other types of institutional investors should be embraced strongly. That came out in the Addis Ababa Action Plan. But somehow the international framework around the treatment of risk capital of pension funds is not coming out coherently across our ecosystem. So we're seeing that public pension funds and sovereign wealth funds are now being looked at outside of the public lens. They're being looked at as private players or commercial players, and they're not exactly that. Of course, they are designed in a particular way, but again, I think there's some issues there that perhaps we can bring out so we can embrace them and harness them better in the world of development finance. And then the other point is just synergizing how we work together as PDBs. I think there's a multiplier effect. We've already demonstrated that, but I think there can be much more done there, because within the ecosystem of PDBs, you have the highly rated and highly capitalized PDBs that, of course, come mostly from the north. And I think there's been strong cooperation between the northern and southern PDBs, but I think that can be done much more systematically in areas, for instance, like liquidity. You know, ratings agencies sometimes are very punitive in the way they look at the access you have to liquidity as a southern PDB. And I think there's standby liquidity type facilities that maybe the international community through the PDB community can look at, because I think that would help the ratings of the PDBs that don't have the benefit of being owned by the rich countries, but we could leverage a little bit on the special positioning of the northern PDBs. Similarly, I think callable capital for the regional banks that have strong callable capital, but of course the shareholders are weak, and the consideration and treatment of that callable capital is almost invisible. This is a similar theme to what came out of the G20 recommendations on how callable capital should be better considered in how MDBs are being looked at by ratings agencies, but also others. I think here as well, this is something that can be done that would strengthen the positioning of regional development banks that can then raise money much more efficiently and at a lower cost in various capital markets. The other area is special drawing rights. I think we saw excellent innovations at the IMF on that. It's been a great success. But of course, there's unfinished business there in terms of how we can get PDBs to better access or harness SDRs. And we know that there's credit quality issues there. We recognize that, but maybe there can be some interesting collaboration between the global MDBs who are AAA rated and other PDBs. And I think there it's low-lying fruit, it's special funding, special resources that are sitting idle that can be better harnessed for development finance, we think. So those are the key ones that I thought I would chip in on. I think cooperation in terms of credit enhancement, there's a lot more that can be done there as well within PDBs. The global MDBs have done it in terms of portfolio risk sharing and swapping risk. I think PDBs perhaps can do that and get a little bit more, uplift on their credit profiles from ratings agencies. The last point is I think the regional MDBs, are a bit constrained also in some of their interactions with other global stakeholders around issues of last mile jurisdictions. We know that fragile economies, fragile countries are receiving a great deal of attention these days for good reasons. But the rhetoric is there, but in practice, there's not enough consideration being given to the PDBs who are acting in those difficult jurisdictions. If anything, you're penalized for going there. And this is why there's been global criticisms of the big players who've not dared go into those tough jurisdictions. It's avoiding risk when you should be the one actually taking a bit more risk. But then those who step in and take that additional risk are not being backed up, and you're not getting enough consideration. So some of these PDBs become lenders of last resort or lenders of near last resort. And even though you're being applauded by some, the ratings agencies, the IMF, the Paris Club, they completely ignore the fact that you're going into tough jurisdictions and they don't give you the consideration you deserve. I think I'll leave that there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for all of those really good interventions and ideas for the discussion. Some of the ideas are already well in the zero draft and the discussion. Some are new. And then I think some are also ones that's about the PDB system working better as a whole, and something for groups like FIX to bring and to take forward as part of the follow-up. So very helpful ideas. The next intervention will be by Mr. Carlo Monticelli, the governor from the CEB.
Thank you very much. It's really a privilege to be here today because we have a very important topic on the agenda. And it's a privilege both as head of the Council of Europe Development Bank, that has been a long supporter of FIX, but also as the chair for 2025 of the group of heads of MDBs. Now, I want to repeat the key point made by the previous speakers, which basically can be summarized about the fact that the importance of the upcoming Fourth International Conference on Financial for Development cannot be overstated. This is a crucial deadline, and it must become an opportunity to catalyze an extra effort to provide ideas and resources. Now, I think that now really is the time for delivery. You see, there has been already a process preparing this important deadline, but going forward, delivery is of the essence. Now, I look at the success that the heads of the NDBs group achieved last year under the leadership of Inter-American Development Bank in enhancing cooperation, delivering results. And what we realized is that our diversity is an asset if there is strategic alignment. And then delivery is often based on commitment to approaches that might not sound grandiose but are crucial. Participation in country platform, active sharing of information, ideas, pipelines. Done. Not only said and declared, but implemented. Mutual recognition of standards. If I look at this document, this is a great document. And, I could, feel 5 interesting meetings going through it, the interesting proposals, the very clear recommendations. So I think that, my time and your time is better used focusing on what is to be done next. So let's look at this and let's just do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And also thank you for your leadership of the MDB group and for the working and the contributions that group is also making to this process. And also for the next speakers, just a reminder to really keep your comments to 3 minutes so that we can have time at the end for a continued conversation. The next intervention will be from Mr. Jordan Schwartz, Executive Vice President from the IADB.
Thanks, Sherry, and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to join you for this important conversation. The IDB has been engaged in the preparatory process towards Sevilla since last year. And just to state up front that we are standing ready to support the co-facilitators, the member states. Spain is the host, to achieve an international conference that resonates across emerging markets and developing economies. To maximize synergies towards Sevilla, just to echo something that Carlo was referring to, it's important, we think, to capitalize on the current reform momentum among the MDBs and to align efforts with the MDB viewpoint note. In that spirit, and given the large scope of the agenda, we're focusing on priorities in our support, which are consistent with the focus of our own strategy and overlap with the priorities of the FIX report. And there's quite a bit of overlap, including with the viewpoint note that set out the MDB objectives, joint objectives last year. First are the instruments to increase private sector mobilization so as to improve productivity, crowd and technology, drive growth. In particular, we think that Sevilla can provide a platform to scale up solutions to pressing barriers, to address pressing barriers to direct investment in developing countries. The need to increase leverage through securitization, originate to share or distribute models, foreign exchange hedge instruments, and the expanding use of credit enhancements, including the combining of balance sheets of multilateral national development banks where practicable. These priorities map with recommendations 16 and 18 of the FIX report. Secondly, innovative financial instruments to help countries increase resilience and better manage disasters, as Admasu was pointing out. These include climate resilient debt clauses in loan contracts, policy guarantees that backstop debt swaps for resilience, conditional credit facilities for building resilience, catastrophe swaps, and catastrophe insurance policies. This aligns well with other recommendations of the FIX report, recommendation 20. And we know that a lot of these instruments they weren't invented yesterday. I mean, resilient debt clauses are found in the Hammurabi Code 3,800 years ago. The idea of the innovation is deploying that cross-border and using the balance sheets of multilaterals in combination with other development banks in order to be able to give relief to those who are suffering from drought, suffering from flood, suffering from other catastrophes during those periods of weather and climate impacts. And third, we support the emphasis of FfD4 on development effectiveness and welcome the recommendation 5 of the report. Just to demonstrate we did read it and we remember the recommendations. We support them, which calls for multilateral, regional, and national banks to work more efficiently as a system. We're already working closely in our region. About 14% of our financing is directed through national development banks on the sovereign guaranteed side. That's about $13 billion a year, 14% of $13 billion a year on average. And that gives us greater access to the retail reach of the national development banks. And it also means greater policy coordination. I guess that's probably my just final observation. We ourselves are perhaps somewhat guilty of becoming very fixed and very fixated and very concerned with instrumentalization and with financial innovation, extremely important, but we probably understate the importance of policy reform in order to mobilize the kind of capital that we're talking about. We recognize that regulation, that the rules of market performance, that pricing, the capacity of institutions is the primary driver of levels of private investment. So I'll leave with that thought and just say that we are looking forward to continued coordination, believe we can play a catalytic role together in financing development. So thank you very much, Arian.
Thank you, and thanks for all of those inputs and ideas, some of which are already in the discussion, some of which can be strengthened further in the discussion. And again, I'm going to start cutting people off a little bit or just reminding you when the time is coming close. So we can have room for everyone to give interventions. I'm now going to go to Mr. David Kushper from EDFI. There you are.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you very much for this, and I'll keep to the time because many things have already been said. First of all, very happy to see how the positive attention to public development banks and DFIs is evolving at this moment, particularly also through the FIX here. So very grateful for this event. I think what we're all showing here is that with relatively small public funding, we can contribute to many of the development goals as set out in the document, such as domestic resource mobilization, such as job creation, such as food security. This is an incredibly positive vibe that we see here. Second, I think that as compared to Addis Ababa, where we focused on the targets for very good reasons 10 years ago, we forgot to focus on the journey. And the journey turns out to be filled with successes and bottlenecks. And we need to put the actors and actions in the journey central to the process here. And in particular, look at how can we replicate successes that we've had, for instance, with the development finance institutions, with the various blended finance facilities that have been created over the past 10 years, thanks to Addis Ababa. How can we replicate that? But also, how do we tackle the bottlenecks that have been identified in that journey? And let me just name 3 of them. One bottleneck extremely important is the issue, it's a wicked problem of local currency lending. That definitely needs to get the attention of all of us in the operationalization of FfD4. Market creation is going to be extremely important. How do we connect the opportunities that are there locally to the firepower of global of PDBs and DFIs? And the third one is already very well formulated by Mr. Tadesse of the TDB, the regulatory frameworks, the difficult incentives that we see in various jurisdictions, and the fact that interoperability needs to be worked on. So these wicked problems, I think we need to focus on, and we stand ready to contribute to that in Sevilla. Thank you very much, Sharon.
Thanks, David, and thanks for highlighting in very succinctly some of the main obstacles that we need to focus on, learning from past experiences and that have been going on. Next, we're going to go to 2 member states representatives, and we'll start with Tani Mohamed Soilihi, the Minister of State for Francophonie and International Partnerships from France. And I think he's going to speak in French, so please, this is the time to take out your
yes,
and 3
please.
minutes, please, sir. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Monsieur le Secrétaire Général.
The Deputy Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, I'm happy to be here with you to speak of the preparation of the 4th Conference of UN for the funding of development, which will be capital for the reform of our financial architecture. That will be a decisive step of 2030 agenda for the sustainable development, for the action program of Addis Ababa and Paris Agreement. We have to adopt ambitious propositions to accelerate the achievement of sustainable goals. Everywhere, crises are multiplying, needs are also increasing, and we know that the public resources are not unlimited. Budgets are constrained, and we see what's happening in the USA and elsewhere, and it has never been so necessary. I'm convinced that the Conference of Seville should be an opportunity to reaffirm with power the objective of SDG, and we have to mobilize as we can for the public good and domestic good. In this regard, I would like to thank the FIX communities for their fruitful engagement and their support to FfD4. We should also remind that the promotion of inclusive growth for the preservation of the planet, it's the philosophy of the Paris Agreement for the people on the planet. It's also the logic initiative demonstrating that investment in the green transition can allow to mobilize resources in a sustainable manner for the service of these objectives. The FfD4 should allow to progress on 3 priority areas. First of all, to accelerate the mobilization of innovative and private funds for the service of development. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to introduce an event which helps to contribute in the world solidarity. We have to continue to deepen that coalition established for 4P and to put more and more the fiscality of service to development. I also think of the implementation of the clauses of the suspension of debt in case of natural disasters, which was also an object of our engagement yesterday in the afternoon. And I think that that's the work we should do to improve the contribution of the private sector to the financing of the SDGs. That can only happen in the best coordination between the rating agencies, financial regulators, private sectors, public banks of development. So the presence of private financial actors in FIX it's an encouraging signal. The second priority area for the FfD4 is the viability of the framework of the treatment of the debt, because all the funding that we can mobilize here can be counterproductive if it's not accompanied by a durable management of the debt. In this way, it appears to be important to reply to the demands of African partners, and this will be an answer serving every state without opposing the principle of generalized mechanisms. And for this, the most effective would be to rely on existing mechanisms like the common frame of debt and the Paris Agreement. Before yesterday, I was in Zambia, where I could notice that those tools proved to be efficient. So that was also supported by the Club of Paris. In order to continue and amplify this progress, France is proposing to have a dialogue mechanism between the United Nations and the Paris Club that will allow to guarantee a greater inclusivity and to have a supportive dialogue on capacity building nationally in terms of management and dealing with debt. The third area on which I'd like to emphasize is the one of the effectivity of the tools. We have to maximize the impact of funding so we may answer to the growing needs, and effectiveness should be the compass of our actions. So at the national level and the European level, we should do it also in the international level. That can only be done with a best collaboration between banks, different banks, and multilateral banks of development. That cooperation should be incarnated by shared tools and standardized tools, or where there are loans in local currencies. So we should equally rely on national frameworks so that we can own projects and have the best use of resources for the good of our populations. We should do it in the respect of standards, norms, qualities, and transparency by mobilizing new funding, by dealing with the issues of debt, by strengthening our relationships. We can be then able to take care of FfD4 as we can. Be assured that France and the European Union remains mobilized for its success. I can then count on you. I thank you. Sorry, it was too fast. I had to rush.
Thank you so much for that statement. Mentioning solidarity taxes, so that's an idea that could maybe be brought to Sevilla for an announcement to consider pushing forward that work as one of the options to bring to Sevilla, and also for the importance of debt issues as well and effective tools. So thank you for those and for France's support in this process. I'm now going to go to Tatiana Rosita, the Secretary for International Affairs in the Ministry of Finance of Brazil. So over to you, just 4 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherry, and it's always a pleasure also to speak after Minister Salihi. I think we were in this very room yesterday on a closed meeting of the Global Solidarity Levi's Task Force. Brazil and France have been working together on this and other topics very closely. So thank you for the leadership, and also thank the Financing Commons and the organizers here for this invitation. I think it's a perfect closing for my week in this wonderful mother city. I've been here for country platform events, for the G20, and for the FIX. I think we have, it has been an incredible learning process in a difficult moment, and also very engaging, and I feel more encouraged, actually. I mean, in this we are, let's be very frank, we are at a crossroads for financing for development, and we will arrive in beautiful Sevilla as such. So it's very important that we keep together and in dialogue. And what I would like to share with you today, and I have heard, I think I share most of the words and the views that I've heard until now. We have had, at the leadership of the G20 last year, had the chance to engage the partners, and I think have quite substantial progress on most of the issues, and in building consensus for most of this issue, build an agenda like around the G20 MDBs roadmap, the optimization of vertical climate funds, private sector mobilization, local foreign exchange risk mitigation, local currency, the need for also regulatory changes. So this, I would like just to briefly share that this year our main challenge, and together with you, will be COP30 and helping to build the Baku-Belém roadmap for COP30. Of course, this will build upon our previous agenda, and FFD, I think, will be a very important moment for that. We'll have to build consensus, but of course we need to go forward. We need to be able to really unlock, all the forces for constructing, I think, a narrative and also showing the concrete steps. I think a roadmap word never has been so necessary, but really with also concrete and feasible steps, so that we can show it as an opportunity, right? FFD is helping us to bridge consensus, to continue to aim at pursuing the SDGs and the climate goals, builds upon, I think, looking forward and taking all this, looking at opportunities and jobs and change, and all the energy and green transformation at the core of it. I think PDBs will have a very important role of that, being the intermediaries in between this global and local financiers. So I really commend you for sharing this report. I would like to and they have a tremendous also, for all the reasons that have been mentioned, a tremendous role in the mobilization of private capital and really showing us the concrete examples and an enabling local environment for all these new instruments, for capital enhancement, for guarantees. We are in, I think, very strong need of showing feasible opportunities. In Brazil, we have done that, and I conclude, also through building a new generation of country platforms, the Brazil climate and ecological climate investment platform, or ecological transformation platform. No wonder it is staged at the BNDES, who is a critical actor in Brazil, but it is a platform built upon, a program led by the government, a programmatic platform, and that aims to be a locus not only of experimentation, but implementation for all we are talking. So to put together MDBs, climate funds, philanthropies, new instruments to mobilize private sector, to fund the great transformative projects and implement climate action. I hope this can also can bring us good lessons to be shared as we go towards COP. But I hope to have already good news to also share at FFD. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I have to say that the Brazilian the country platform has been inspirational, I think, in thinking through the architecture of what you did and how you did it and what other countries can learn from that. So thank you for your leadership in many ways. I'm now going to go to some of the development partners, including UNDP, our colleagues at UNDP, Tom Bello, the Director of Sustainable Finance Hub. Tom, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Shari. And just to make a couple of points around the continuing conversation pathways between FIX, FFD4, and absolutely COP30, as well as I've heard the conversation here, and it's clear that we all agree that public development banks really are a major motor to drive implementation of FfD4. And so clearly the message I have heard is the importance of national development banks being in the driving seat at the country level in this endeavour, alongside other national actors. And the 2 points I wanted to raise around the convergence of the conversation here and FfD4 and COP30 are really focused on country-level implementation of these agendas. As many have said, we need to get ready now to implement FfD4 and COP30 and scaled-up ambition and NDCs, not wait for the conferences and agreement of the outcomes themselves. So two areas I'd like to emphasize, and the first is neatly following on from the conversation about country platforms. It's been truly inspirational to hear about the focus on country leadership, integrated approaches to the different stacks of capital that need to be brought to bear, and collaborative action in that regard. In FfD4, there is a huge opportunity to bring together our efforts around country platforms and the efforts by countries to implement integrated national financing frameworks as a vehicle for FfD4 implementation. Let's get ready for Sevilla to come together and have some concrete actions to deliver on taking forward those country-driven approaches to financing sustainable development. The second area is really a conversation which has come out very clearly to me here, which is not just that we need to scale transactions at the country level, but that we also need to take a system-wide or country-wide approach to unlocking private capital. And in that context, if we take a country-wide approach, the UN, development actors, finance institutions, public development banks really do need to look at how we work in complementary ways. And I think there are 4 key areas that we need to look at together much more systematically. One, the role that we play with different emphases and different comparative advantage on policy de-risking at the country level. The second is the different ways in which we can support project preparation and pipeline development. The third, around financial de-risking. And the fourth, which must not be forgotten, is how we drive the unlocking of private capital with a focus on impact. It may well be the UN has different emphases in those 4 areas, and public development banks have different emphases in those 4 areas, but surely by looking at our complementarities, we have more potential to drive the country and system-wide changes we need to truly finance sustainable development. So let's look to launch an initiative in this regard in Sevilla.
Thank you, Tom, and for bringing up the importance of plans. Certainly Brazil had a strong plan at the basis of its country platform and INFFs, and then also for these other issues, which is the 4 issues of perfect transition to our next speaker, who is from Allianz Global Investors, Ms. Nadia Nikolova, and who is also a managing director and is also one of the participants in GISD, Global Investors for Sustainable Development. So someone we have talked to a lot about private investment in the SDGs. Nadia, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. I think coming to FfD4, we should also think about private capital mobilization, many of you have mentioned, but that would include having the private sector there. And not just the people and the investors that are investing already, but also those that are not investing, so that we can understand really what are the hindrances of many institutional investors that are saying on the sidelines. And I have to say, in the last 2 months, those have only gotten worse. We talk about capital reform that should include institutional investors, and what does it require from whether it's capital, whether it's disclosure regulations, what is required in order to crowd in institutional investors, banks, as well as the philanthropic sector. One thing that I think we tend to forget is that we need to meet investors where they are. And I know that's a tough message to hear, but there are driving forces that make investors fulfill sustainable development goals. We need to create those driving forces. And those would include regulatory changes, simplicity, but also speed of execution. One word I heard only once, and that is really important for private sector, is liquidity. We have been talking a lot about de-risking solutions, but not enough is said about liquidity. If we are able to solve that, I think a lot of the conversation becomes much faster and much quicker. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's really, I just want to note that at FfD4, there will be an International Business Forum as well. So you're encouraged to bring your private partners and encourage them to come to be part of that discussion, because hearing these needs from the private sector is so critical to having that discussion about how leveraging is going to work. So we don't end up 10 years from now saying, oops, we tried again and we haven't been able to do this in a way that is actually sustainable and meaningful. So thank you, Nadia, for your comments. And I'm now going to go to the CSO perspective from Foros, F-O-R-U-S, from Christelle Kalue, the president of Foros. And I don't know where is.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will speak in French, please. Lorsque nous parlons des
When we talk about public banks of development, we speak of taxpayers, money of taxpayers collected in the South countries and North countries. So the development is being reduced in many countries, where I can say that the public funding of development banks is constrained by a number of situations, considerable needs, in contrary, in different countries, which is not the case in other countries I meant. So it's crucial that funding be available in Seville. Initiatives such as fiscal conventions of the UN defended by the groups of Africa of UN, the fortune defended by the Brazilian presidency of G20. So the collection of the polluters can be initiatives that can help generate millions of additional fiscal revenues. So that should affirm the objectives of aligning the mandates of public banks of development to help the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. So the actionary states adopted the said mandate with less public funds for development, which is not acceptable for the fact that the project do not contribute directly to the ODDs. So the recommendations of placing the development banks in the center of the national strategies by aligning the funding on the priorities set by countries should go far. The multilateral banks of development and of direct foreign investment should also be registered fully under this perspective. So the coherence of these development banks, financial institutions of countries are not explicitly mentioned, while this could have allowed to exploit or leverage on the local side. And also financial institutions of Western countries should participate in coherent systems, participate or assist development banks. The issue of the legitimacy of this here, when it comes to address the challenge that we come across in the world. So there are projects that have a transformative value in short or long terms, immediate or direct. In the statement of Fix 27, there are things that are not expressly or clearly expressed, including the human right respect, which should be in all public development banks. So those should appear. And we see here companies that should implement investments. Public development banks are powerful levers here in the 21st century. The public development banks for a just transition with clear calendars, with investment plans for fossil fuels towards green energies. Those were a few points I wanted to raise. We have In our statement, we have several points, but I would just invite you to read more or find out more about it.
And some of which are for fix and some of which are for, we can think about as well in FfD4. And just to also note, there will be a civil society forum in Sevilla. It'll happen the weekend before the conference, and the information will be posted on our website shortly. So it's another place for civil society to come and bring voices to the conference for leaders to hear. The next speaker is Jejun Chu from the International Commission of Experts on Financing for Development. She's going to, this commission was a commission that the government of Spain so very generously funded to bring ideas of academics and experts to this discussion. And Jejun is one of the experts from that committee. And so Jejun, over to you, 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, Sherry. So I'm very delighted to have the opportunity in my capacity as a member of the International Commission of Experts on Financing for Development to share with you the core message from the Commission report and the key recommendations on how to unleash the full potential of PDB to achieve SDGs. So in this Commission report, we called for a paradigm shift from the billions to trillions agenda to a transformative state in pursuit of sustainable impact at scale. So the prevailing from billions to trillions approach has failed to deliver the promise that they have placed upon private sectors. Number one, they are primarily focused on the quantity of money to scale more, but with very little attention to the quality of the funding that has been mobilized. And secondly, they primarily taken a project-level approach with very little attention to the system-level barriers, and which has failed to foster a transformative change that we are much needed today. And last but not least, in practice, private sector mobilization may turn out into ineffective and even counterproductive. For example, they may extract excessive subsidies, profit-driven private sector may invest in projects with low donor impact. They may prioritize benefit but socialize risks. So it is high time for us to make this paradigm shift because the cost of no action will be very high. In order to gear towards this transformative state approach, the PDB are well positioned to act as a key pivotal player to make it happen. So in this Commission report, we have made 3 key recommendations on how PDB can take the lead in making this transformative paradigm shift. Number one, at the strategy level, PDB should take the lead in embracing a transformative, holistic, and comprehensive approach to financing SDGs. Especially, they have to place the structural transformation in a sustainable and equitable manner at the core of their mandate. And this has to be achieved within the planetary and natural boundaries. They really need the spirit of public entrepreneurship to make it happen. And secondly, at the operational level, PDB have to go beyond the project-level approach and to act as public entrepreneur to pursue transformational scaling. Let me explain to you what I mean by transformational scaling. It has 3 components. The first one, they have to focus on long-term goals. They need to have a comprehensive and long-term vision to recognize the scales of the challenge. And number 2, we need to plan the potential pathway and roadmap, how we can achieve the goal, step by step, have the pathway to do so. And number 3, we need to advance a planning framework that they can involve all stakeholders, both public, private, and civil society, to address the systematic barriers and to achieve the transformational scaling and sustainable development impact at scale. So this is the second key proposal. And finally, it's also very important at the level of international rules. We need to adopt a new financial regulatory framework for PDBs. It's very dangerous for PDB to blindly comply with Basel Accord, which is designed to regulate commercial banks. Otherwise, PDB would mimic commercial banks and to crowd out the market. It is also very important to reform the credit rating agency, which are private companies, but their methodologies really act as de facto regulators. It may make our PDB more risk-averse, but they should take the role. So to conclude, I think it's very important for PDB to take a lead in this transformative shift. Yeah, back to you, Sherry.
Thank you so much. And really, if you should all look at the report, it's on the financing for the FfD4 website, and it really does, it was independent experts coming together who put PDBs at the center of much of the thinking. So really worth for this group to look at that report as well. So we're now going to open the floor. We have around 10 minutes, a little less than 10 minutes left. And for comments and or questions or thoughts from everyone around the room. So please lift up your nameplate and do it quickly because we don't have that much time. Yes, please go ahead and introduce yourselves since I can't see that far away.
Thank you very much. My name is Junaid Ahmed. I'm Vice President Operations for MIGA, the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. Chairperson, I'm going to take a risk, given that's my agency's job. I want to put a challenge in front of the Finance in Common group. We'd like to put from MIGA a challenge of putting up $5 billion in market finance to support PDBs that underpin the country platforms that are going forward. But it requires the following. It requires other credit enhancement agencies to come in the game with us, and it requires some of the MDBs to come in the game with us, and to position ourselves for Belém, and to say that at Belém, we would be able to say that we are able to mobilize 10 billion in support of a group of public development banks, again, under country platforms. I think unless we move forward with that kind of a commitment, we are not going to be able to translate what is written in this report. Taking into account what my friend Jordan Schwartz has said, policy frameworks, absolutely, no issue about that. Regulatory frameworks, no issue about that. But I think we have a group of PDBs that can be supported in reinsuring their balance sheets, as well as accessing long-term loans at greater tenor and at lower interest rates. So it's a challenge. We're putting up $5 billion from MIGA's side.
Thank you. And may I suggest that you think about, because so COP will be an important point, but also the FfD4 is also goes beyond just thinking about the climate and is thinking about financing for development more broadly. So I would suggest to get together, to have that conversation, bring it to FfD4, and then bring the next step of it to COP in the fall. So to really to bring it to both places as one of the initiatives that can also show the link between these different processes, which is really great to show as well. I think I see someone's hand over there. Yes, please go ahead and please introduce yourself, because I wish I could see, but I can't.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's CAF, Latin American Development Bank for Latin American and Caribbean, I'm sorry. So being in South Africa and being Latin American Bank, I'm going to be making something a bit light. I'm going to quote Shakira today. I think we need to, on the Waka Waka song, today's our day. We should pave the way. We're here in Fix and we should believe it. And I think Sevilla should be the occasion for it. At CAF, we're very active in it, preparing Sevilla. On the first thing, we're going to be hosting IDFC, which is a sister of the broad institution here of the Fix. And on that, I mean, many of the institutions here present at this table were not present in Addis Ababa. So thank you so much for having us today. And I think Sevilla should be the occasion for it. On the report that were just mentioned by Janjun Shu, there's one quality of the report, which is the subsidiarity. And it's a very important aspect, and that's something we should take into account. I mean, decision process should be taken, and that's, I'm quoting here your report, and should be handled by the governance body closest to the social reality and the citizens they serve. That's why regional bank and PDB should enhance and should be present in Sevilla. And that's what we're going to be doing at CAF. At the request of the Spanish government, CAF is bringing the 33 Minister of Finance to Sevilla of the region. That's going to enhance the quality of the discussion. We want to, our Minister of Finance to be present, to be taking part of these conversations. And we're looking forward to have much more activities with many of our partners here to showcase what we're doing. It's very important in this moment to showcase the successful stories we have together with many partners. We want to work with many IFIs especially from emerging and developing and transition countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thanks to CAF for the leadership and for working so closely with FfD4. So really appreciate the support and the inputs. I'm now going to go to IFAD. We have 3 more speakers, so IFAD next, yes.
Thank you very much. So first of all, I think one of the beauties of being at the same time as the G20 is that I feel that the FIX, there has been a sense of community, and I would like to build on this also for Seville. It's very clear at this moment that the signal of being strategically aligned, of being externally coherent and effective will be even more important. And focusing, I think some of you have mentioned, on the areas of convergence. And on the ones where there's more controversy, obviously there will need to be a coalition of the willing, but we have to also show what are the areas of convergence. If we think about Seville and Addis was already a fantastic text. We had all the fantastic ideas on scaling up, on the private sector, on implementation, and the reality is there has been a mixed progress. So now for Seville, probably we need a balance between the ambition and showing and the progress that we have made. One of the issues to me is that we have focused on scale, but not on the quality of the impact too. So it's very clear that this world, we are where we are because of inequality at the core of it, and because of some populations being left behind in all type of economies. So I think the inequality and how we are addressing certain parts of the population, this investment will become even more important. Policy regulation, we know it's so important, but are we actually from the MDBs, from the PDBs, from the DFIs like IFAD really addressing the policy side, or are we just focusing on adding country platforms, adding more investments, but without that cohesion? Are we really using the instruments to catalyze and to de-risk? When we talk to private sector investors, obviously the first thing they ask is, do you have a first loss? So do we have enough grant money? Are we really, or are we just adding more in terms of the concessional finance? So even how we work in terms of our instruments, I think that needs to evolve. From IFAD and being a DFI, this has meant, well, being the first United Nations agency, having a credit rating, using our balance sheet now to co-invest with the private sector, starting to put partial credit guarantees also for small-scale farmers. So we all need to evolve, and we need to make sure that we are fit for what's coming. And what's coming probably is that inequality might continue to increase. And so what are we doing for those populations? So let's also focus on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then I'm going to go next to the last two speakers. Next is Alan from Global Green Climate Fund.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We know, and you said that several times today, that one of the key challenges that we have now on the way for the FfD4 conference is basically to make the reform of the international financial architecture and to work as a system. And actually, we believe as a multilateral climate fund at the GCF that we have a critical role to play. We have a critical role to play to make this catalytic effect. First, de-risking all the partners, including the PDBs, the MDBs, and the private sector, of course, and also to help setting the country platform. And I think the Brazil is a good example because the GCF was putting 1 million to help setting the platform. So the GCF will be very happy to participate and to be closely associated on the road to Sevilla in all the preparatory meetings. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And finally, Tanti.
Thank you, Shari. Antti Karhunen, Director for Sustainable Finance, the European Commission. So what we need to do is to mobilize all possible resources, public, private, domestic, and international, to bridge the SDG gap. And in particular, we need to leverage private finance at scale. And therefore, there are many good messages, I think, that the FIX should be passing on. First, it's the strong message on closer partnership and cooperation among the PDBs and between the MDBs and the PDBs to work better as a system. Second, the role of PDBs, of course, is essential in crowding in private capital through targeted funding and risk-sharing mechanisms. And here, the EU's Global Gateway and the FSD Plus guarantees can support the PDBs and MDBs as well as the DFIs. Further, the local knowledge and financial capacities of national development banks is extremely valuable, and they also play a very key role in the country platforms such as the INFFs. And we would also suggest to highlight the NDB's capacity to enhance the representation and voice of developing countries in the international financial architecture. And finally, PDBs have a very important role to play in supporting partner countries' efforts to collect more domestic resources to finance their sustainable investments and also to improve their public investment and asset management. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Antti, and really thank you to everybody for all the comments and thoughts and ideas. I've been taking really good notes to bring to the discussions in New York, and I hope we can continue this conversation as we move towards Seville, because the preparation is as important as the conference itself, as important as the follow-up. So we are going to conclude now. I'm not going to waste any time with concluding words more than that, but to thank everybody again. The closing ceremony starts at 2, and we now, before that ceremony, everybody should come. No? Oh, and then I completely was wrong. Okay, we have closing remarks. Sorry from everybody. So we have closing remarks from Anton Liz Garcia. Very, very sorry to forget you, because we can't forget you. The director from the Spanish Agency for International Development Cooperation, the host of the conference. So very sorry.
No worries, Shari. I'm very conscious that this is probably the last meeting for many of you after 2 wonderful days here in Cape Town. And we are just the hosts in Seville. We are the ones that are going to make sure that we try to match the hospitality that we enjoy from our South African friends here. And thank you, Remy, and thank you to our South African friends. I mean, we live challenging times. We haven't talked much about the challenges, and this is great because I'm a bit tired of multilateral meetings in where we have just gloom and doom. You have here a collection of doers, people that are doing things, that are working together. Shari team, like UNDESA, we are behind you. We are behind our governments in negotiating an ambitious outcome for Seville. And I think the Undersecretary General was mentioning it. This is probably the last chance to meet the SDGs. Beyond the SDGs, we need to find a sustainable development. We are falling short in some of the outcomes, but we are also making great progress. And let's also be clear, we've never been so well in terms of sustainable development as humanity. There is a crisis that we need to tackle, though, which is a crisis of trust in the multilateral system, trust among our countries. And I think this is also a crisis that needs to be tackled in Seville. And that's why Spain stepped forward to play this humble role of hosts, to build as a bridge builder, to make sure that we come out of Seville with more trust in the multilateral system, more trust among one another. How do we build this trust? With ambition. I think incremental changes and gathering the opinions on the floor, incremental changes are no longer enough. We need a paradigm shift. We need to connect all the dots. I mean, what we do as PDBs is part of the role. There is tax. There is, of course, debt. There is trade. There are many different levers that we need to tap into to promote sustainable development. There is reform as well. We need to do more, but we also need to do better, and we need to work together. All of the people around this room are already doing so, but I think this good report that has been produced by Finance in Common also shows how we can work more as a system. And I think the word system has been underscored by many as well in the room. And the third way of building trust is to be concrete and implementation. Álvaro was mentioning it. Addis is a great document. It's true that we didn't have the SDGs in Addis. We didn't have the Paris Agreement in Addis. There are a few things that need to be added, but where we need to get better at is in implementation, practical solutions. Others were mentioning it. And Sevilla starts in Sevilla. It's not the end of a process. It's actually the beginning. Here you have the implementers, as I said, national development banks. So we need bigger banks. We need capital increases, but we also need to get better at what we do, harmonization, interoperability, mutual recognition, more emphasis on effectiveness. You know, that this is an agenda that has decayed over time, and I think we need to retake it again. We are, of course, supporting the negotiators. Certainly from Spain, we support the highest level possible of ambition, and I think the zero draft is indeed a good starting point, certainly from the perspective of public development banks. Let's don't forget the side events. You know, in Seville, there will be the main negotiations, but it will be an opportunity for all of us to show our commitment, to raise our hand, to say that this is indeed about values and the role of solidarity in tackling the world's challenges. It's also about interest, and I think and I conclude with this, let's also use Seville to start changing narratives. The 2030 agenda was a game changer. This was not an agenda for some countries in the world. It was an agenda for all of us. The same with the Paris Agreement. It's a common agenda, common and differentiated responsibilities, but a responsibility of us all. And we have the opportunity in Sevilla to also change the paradigm. This is not just about some countries or some actors. This is about all of us. It's about planet and people, indistinguishable. So again, we have a big opportunity. We have many challenges, and sometimes we get back down in the many things that we're not doing well. This group, Finance in Common and the PDBs, show that working together we can make a difference. And let's make sure that in Seville we support, you know, an ambitious outcome, and that each of us takes also responsibility by working together and doing better what we do, delivering for people and planet. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anton, and there wouldn't have been a conclusion without your remarks. So thank you for that concluding remarks. And we're going to go now over to the side for a group picture and then over to the closing ceremony. And I got that right now.